गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट वंस अगेन। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। वणक्कम, प्रणाम और सत श्री अकाल। आज ये हमारा पांचवा किस्सा है एनालिसिस ग्लोबल ग्लोबल पावर मैट्रिक्स के बारे में। हम इससे पहले चार किस्से कर चुके हैं और इस मैट्रिक्स का रशिया, यूएसए और चाइना के बारे में एक एक अलग अलग किस्से कर चुके हैं जिसमें हमने पूरा विश्लेषण किया है। आज हम इसका पूरा कंसोलिडेटेड एनालिसिस करेंगे और इसके लिए मेरे साथ हैं राइट ब्रिगेडियर अरुण सहगल, जनरल विनोद भाटिया और जनरल अनिल आहूजा। Sirs, good evening and welcome for this overviewing analysis. Right? And at the outset, मैं सबको बताना चाहता हूँ, I am very grateful to all three of you कि आपने इतना टाइम निकाला आपके शेड्यूल से और इतना अच्छा एनालिसिस दिया, क्योंकि ये एनालिसिस मेरे ख्याल में बहुत लोग देख रहे हैं और उनको अच्छा भी लगा है, राइट? पर और आज के दिन जब हमारा प्रधानमंत्री यूएसए में है, बहुत डील्स साइन हो चुके हैं। वो इंडियन टेक्नोलॉजी ट्रांसफर का डील साइन हो चुका है और भी आईसीईटी के सेमीकंडक्टर्स के बारे में और स्पेस और वगैरह वगैरह के बारे में डील साइन होने बाकी है और अनाउंसमेंट्स आएंगे, राइट? While all this is euphoria and it is very nice, the actual power balance and the games will begin hereafter. And ये जो डील जो भी विजिट हो रहा है, it is almost a watershed moment क्योंकि it catapults India into a different level. So before we start our overviewing analysis, and I have a few pointed questions for each of you, I'll just recap a few issues which we have discussed over the past 1 week. Right? In this analysis of the global power matrix, I have to reiterate कि इंडिया का जो जीडीपी है वो 2025 में जापान का पार करने का अंदेशा है और 2030 तक हम 6-7-8 ट्रिलियन डॉलर के जीडीपी होंगे। जब हम उस स्तर तक पहुंच जाएंगे, वी आर अ हेवीवेट प्लेयर इन द वर्ल्ड, इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं होना चाहिए, राइट? ये सिर्फ जापान काउंसिल ऑफ इकोनॉमिक रिसर्च का मानना नहीं है, ये ड्यूश बैंक का भी व्यू यही है और मॉर्गन स्टैनली का भी व्यू यही है और ये रिपोर्ट बहुत जगह से आ चुका है, राइट? दूसरी बात यह है कि पिछले 1-2 साल से हम देख रहे हैं कि भारत जो है वो बहुत ग्लोबल अफेयर्स में सेंट्रलिटी पा चुका है। जब पहले माना जाता था कि इंडिया इज अ स्विंग स्टेट का मतलब जिस तरीके से जिस तरह भारत झुकेगा वो पलटा भारी हो जाएगा, पर आजकल सब बोल रहे हैं कि भारत इंडिया इज अ बैलेंसिंग पावर, इट्स अ बैलेंसिंग पावर इन ग्रेट पावर इक्वेशंस। और मेरा मानना ये है और हम सब का मानना यही है कि जैसे जैसे हमारा अर्थव्यवस्था बढ़ता जाएगा और हमारा कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव नेशनल पावर बढ़ता जाएगा, वी विल बिकम सम काइंड ऑफ अ कंट्रोलिंग पावर, कम से कम इंडियन ओशन रीजन में, राइट? और ये बात जो है, जो ये पूरा सीरीज का जो प्रोत्साहन मिला है वो मेरे को ये कार्टून से मिला है, जो एक इट्स अ कार्टून बाय एन अमेरिकन अबाउट 1-2 years बैक। सो देयर इज सम लॉजिक इन व्हाट ही हैज डन और इसीलिए ये हम ये डिस्कस कर रहे हैं। एंड दिस इज आल्सो बीइंग बोर्न आउट बाय द फैक्ट ऑफ द प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स विजिट टू वॉशिंगटन, राइट? जैसे हमने बताया, ये मैट्रिक्स अभी हम पढ़ते आ रहे हैं, एनालाइज करते आ रहे हैं। इसमें बड़ा क्लियर है यूएसए और इंडिया के बीच में आकर्षण है और चाइना और रशिया के बीच में आकर्षण है। बाकी इंटर रिलेशनशिप में कुछ तनाव है, कुछ आकर्षण है और ओवरऑल ये है, ये तो सबको पता है। बट हमारा जो पूरा डिस्कशन पिछले एक हफ्ते से, उसमें उसका नतीजा क्या निकला? उसका नतीजा ये निकला है कि यूएसए जो है वो अभी भी इट्स द मोस्ट डोमिनेटिंग पावर। लोग बोलते हैं डिक्लाइन हो रहा है, पर उस डिक्लाइन का कोई बड़ा असर अभी तक नहीं पड़ा, राइट? जहां तक चाइना का सवाल है, चाइना का ये है, इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं कि इट इज एन इकोनॉमिक सुपर पावर एंड इट इज एन एस्पायरिंग ग्लोबल पावर, बट इट इज इन डिक्लाइन। ये डिक्लाइन इसीलिए है कि उसका आबादी घट रहा है और डेमोग्राफिक डिक्लाइन हो रहा है। लोग बोलते हैं कि ये बड़ी बात नहीं है, पर आप जरा सोचिए, कोई भी देश अपना, इट इज ऑल डिपेंडेंट ऑन इट्स पॉपुलेशन। अगर पॉपुलेशन ही नहीं है तो वो देश का पावर कहाँ से आएगा? अपने लोगों से ही पावर आएगा। जहां तक रशिया का सवाल है, रशिया ये जो यूक्रेन के वॉर में फंसा हुआ है, और इसकी वजह से इसका अर्थव्यवस्था और बाकी डिप्लोमेटिक रिलेशंस भी सफर होंगे। अगर वो उसमें थोड़ा सफर होंगे तो इट विल इमर्ज एज अ वीकेंड पावर। ये एक वीकेंड पावर ही रहेगा कुछ दिन तक, कुछ हद से तक। मेरे ख्याल में एक नेक्स्ट 5 to 10 years इट विल रिमेन अ पावर, बट अ वीकेंड पावर। जहां तक भारत का सवाल है, वी आर अ ग्रोइंग पावर एंड वी आर एमर्जिंग फ्रॉम रेटिसेंस। मैं रेटिसेंस इसीलिए इस्तेमाल कर रहा हूँ शब्द, क्योंकि ये माना गया है कि इंडिया इज अ रेटिसेंट पावर ग्लोबली, नॉट प्रिपेयर्ड टू कमिट इटसेल्फ टू अ स्टेटेड पोजीशन फ्रॉम अ लॉन्ग टाइम, एंड इट अपियर्स कि हम कुछ कमिटमेंट, वी आर प्रिपेयर्ड टू अंडरटेक अ कमिटमेंट, right? And things are changing in this matrix. Now, keeping all this in view, India's equations with Russia or USA or its tension-filled relations with China are not going to change in a hurry as India is changing. In some cases, ये हो सकता है it might go to the next level, right? But this balance of power game which goes on put some questions in front of us, जो मैंने आपकी बातों से ही निकाला है, राइट? तो सबसे पहला क्वेश्चन ये है कि एज अ कॉन्सिक्वेंस ऑफ आवर ग्रोइंग इंडो यूएस स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप, क्या हम ये देख रहे हैं कि यूएस इंडिया वर्सेस रशिया चाइना का एक डैड निकल रहा है? डैड का मतलब दो ग्रुपिंग्स निकल रहे हैं। अगर आर वी बीइंग ड्रिवन इनटू दिस डैड, क्या हमें मजबूरन ये अपनाना पड़ रहा है? अगर ये हो गया तो what are the implications for India, and how do we handle this situation so that we don't get into such a situation where we have to choose between our friends and our partners, and we don't end up in a situation where we have permanent adversaries, right? I'll request General Ahuja, आप जरा इसको please kind of throw some light on it.
Thank you, General Shankar. Thank you for getting me into this show with in the company of my two very eminent panelists. Privileged to be here. अभी आपका जो फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन आपने पूछा है कि हम अपनी यूएस के साथ स्ट्रैटेजिक पार्टनरशिप के कारण आर वी सीइंग द इमर्जेंस ऑफ अ डायड, यानी आपने दिखाया एक तरफ यूएस प्लस इंडिया और दूसरी तरफ वर्सेस आपने दिखाया रशिया प्लस चाइना, और इसकी क्या इंप्लीकेशंस होंगी। वेल, टू योर क्वेश्चंस, माय आंसर is it emergence of a dyad? My answer is yes and no. Well, I say yes if you wish to call it a dyad, then it has huge overlaps and extensions on both sides. There are many more players on the American side, the NATO, the entire Western countries, and there are some other nations on the Russia and the China side. Then, considering this dyad, like I said, US plus India versus Russia plus China, this would entail considering only 4 players, which, like I said, is not really the case. And also, it gives us a feeling that we have a relationship of confrontation, competition, contestation with both, with Russia as well as with China, which is not really the case. Our competition, conflict, confrontation, cooperation, whatever it is, in that sense, is towards Russia, is towards China. But as far as Russia is concerned, it remains a traditional friend and it remains a reliable partner, which, one would not like to bring it into any of those different poles in a dyad. सो इसलिए मैं आपने जो ओरिजिनल फॉर्मुलेशन किया है हमारे इस डायलॉग का, ग्लोबल पावर मैट्रिक्स, मैं उसको ज्यादा एप्रोप्रिएट समझता हूं रादर देन कंसिडरिंग इट एज अ डायड, क्योंकि इन चारों देशों के अंदर, चारों पावर्स के अंदर आपस के इंट्रिकेट रिलेशंस हैं, एक वेब ऑफ रिलेशनशिप है जिसको हम पहले के डायलॉग्स के अंदर भी डिस्कस कर चुके हैं और आज आपने अभी भी अपने शुरू के चार्ट के अंदर हमें यही समझाया है. Now, let's see. There are three major global powers: US, China, Russia. Russia and China, they have some vital national interests competing with the US. And as Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff of US, General Mark Milley, had said earlier during the year, that the conflict between the US and these two countries is neither inevitable nor imminent. So they are a par in their right earnest, both of them. Today, US and today Russia and China, now they have come close to each other. Russia, despite being a major power, today is in a disadvantageous position, is in a kind of a secondary position to China because of its need to export its energy, to find a trade alternate destination for trade, for getting alternate trade, and for getting technology, and for getting tremendous amount of support. But we must remember that both these countries know each other's strengths, know each other's vulnerabilities. They have 300 odd agreements, and Russia will remain a power, although temporarily in a secondary position to China. Now, next, as far as the direction that the current global situation is taking, the war in Ukraine. Now, for Russia, I'm not in a position to predict that what will be the final outcome of this war. How will it settle? How will it resolve itself? I mean, that's a separate discussion by itself. But as far as Russia is concerned, for them, it's an existential war. It's an existential threat. This brings into their mind the memories of 1917 during World War I, when during the Tsar's regime, they started going down at that time because Russia was weak, because Russia suffered. It brings them back the memories of 1941 when the Germans walked into Russia. So it's a matter of their sovereignty. Now, what I'm trying to come to is that Russia is fighting an existential war. Whatever happens, it will emerge weak, but it will not be prudent for us to write off Russia. We must consider it as a power which is here to stay. The level of power may change, the content of the relationship may change, but then this relationship should not be written off that Russia is gone as a power. The next aspect I wish to highlight is that we have imperatives of our equipment. 60 to 65% of equipment, its sustenance, our strategic partnership in many critical fields. We are all aware of them. We've discussed them. And of course, our now reliance on energy, and then the traditional partnership. So you don't you don't leave your traditional partners, but yes, your strategic realities compel you to fine tune the balance of relationship, the weight of relationship. Now, having spoken of Russia and of the three powers, today the competition that is taking place is between US and China. And this competition is all around us. It is along the LAC, it is in Nepal, it's in Bangladesh, it's in Myanmar, it's all around us in the Indian Ocean. And we have been put at the geographic front line of the Indo Pacific. And in this situation, inaction is not an option for us. Passive non alignment is not an option for us. We have to play a role, and to play that role, we have to get a space in this region. And to get that space, we have spoken right from our first dialogue on this under this title. We have said India is a balancing power. To be a viable balancing power, we have to look at economy, we have to look at politics, we have to look at diplomacy, but then we have to look at the cutting edge of the comprehensive national power, because at the end of the day, the cutting edge is actually the cutting edge. Now, our relationship comes in with America and with Russia. Now, when we look at building our power, we have to look at building our own capabilities at one side and bridging the operational gaps that exist today on the other side. Because what we are doing in capability development is we are doing it on two tracks. Track one is to have your operational preparedness to fight today and now the real threats that exist on our borders every day. The second aspect of this is to build our capabilities for the future. Now, if we look at the very current things that we are talking of, the deal that is likely to be signed for the Predators, for MQ-9s that we are likely to get, is building your capability for here and now. Getting G engine manufacturing, co-development, co-production, technology cooperation, defense industrial cooperation is building our capability for tomorrow and day after. But both are important. Now, today for our capability, according to statistics given by quoted from IISS, we have 90% of armored vehicles, 69% of combat aircraft, 44% of submarines and ships, 65% of our imported missiles, which are of Russian origin. And of course, we have our BrahMos, we have our other strategic assets with Navy and within many other fields. But then we have other domains. We have the domain of ISR. We have the domain of maritime domain awareness, of electronic warfare, for strategic and medium lift air capability, in cyber, space, in critical and emerging technologies. There, the greater prowess is of the American side. So, what we have to do is that we have to make it clear to our friends that it's not a zero sum relationship. Both are important. Both have their own place, but we have to know our interests, our requirements, without making them clash with each other. With China, our boundary question is not settled. Our LAC, our LC on the west, they are here to stay. CBMs have lost their relevance, but they still have relevance because we still diffuse a number of things. So we will have to manage our borders, and we will have to learn to work in this global matrix that you have so nicely highlighted. And uh, when we build our capability, when we build our partnership, there will be certain conditionalities, there will be certain demands imposed on us. We have to weigh them. We have to weigh them very carefully. That what is undermining our national interests, we will not accept it. But what is functional and procedural, well, we'll have to accept some of them. So let's leave it to the wisdom of our people who are negotiating it. And finally, while working with Russia, while working with the US, we have to nurture this relationship. And in the conflicting environment that exists today, nurturing has become a little more difficult. And with China, we have to manage this relationship, manage with power, manage with strength, manage with capability. There is no choice, there is no utopian solution for it.
Right, sir.
So
I
that's
think
the
that was
implication.
very
Thank you.
that's very nicely put. So, Brigadier Sahgal, sir, your views on it, quick, short views, so that then we can get on to the next questions.
I generally agree with what General Ahuja has said, but I'd like to make two, 3 points. The fundamental issue is, like I said yesterday in our discussion, that Russia and United States are two of our significant partnerships. Each allow us a certain degree of strategic space and a strategic capabilities which we cannot overlook. And for India, we do not have to make a choice. But like I also said, that we had a tendency of accepting or taking the Russian relationship as an entitlement issue. That's not going to happen. It's going to become more transactional, and it will be a more transactional, and that's something which we have to live with. My understanding is that we are not cutting off, like today's editorial in Economic Times tends to say that we are making strategic choices. I would not agree with that, and I've said so in my remarks. But with the United States, again, we have to understand that we have intrinsic leverages with the United States. There's a perception in the media's mindset that we are getting into this relationship because we want anything. No,
No. Yes, we
we
will
are
go
getting
together
into
on
this
that.
relationship because it is of strategic convergences for both of us, and that's important issue that we have to understand. Similarly, the strategic convergences with Russia are equally this thing. We discussed the fact yesterday that the Russians are basically a European player. They want to be a European power. They are not very comfortable with the Chinese. They understand the Chinese game plan. So I think taking that cognizance into view, I think we have to do a good balancing act between both the powers, and we have to, and like I said, 10 years from now is the period when all these things will start being put in place. And it's important for us because we always keep extending our 10-year periods because of our own deficiencies. Unfortunately, beyond 2030, the balance of power globally is going to be different, and India will have to take a call. And India will have to take a call in developing its capacities and capabilities to deal with the situations that it will face, as highlighted by General Ahuja.
Right,
Thank you.
sir. You've given a complimentary thing to what General Ahuja has said, and I do agree with both of you. But let's hear General Bhatia before we cap it and go to the next question.
Uh, Thank you, General Shankar. I think I have fully endorsed and agree to what General Ahuja and General Brigadier Sahgal said. I'll Brigadier Sahgal said a very nice this thing. We will balance it. I think India has a balancing power. को हमको balance करना पड़ेगा our relationship. हमको balance करना पड़ेगा in the balance of power. हमको balance करना in the balance of interest. So there's a lot of balancing which is required. The balance of power की game में balance of interest हमारे interest भी है. We have to balance our relationship with US. We have to balance our relationship with Russia. Both are very important to us. And we also balance the relationship with China also. We cannot say कि चाइना के साथ हम हमेशा strategic competition में रहेंगे, confrontation में रहेंगे, conflict में रहेंगे. There has to be strategic cooperation and coordination also. We are neighbors after all. हमें ये नहीं भूलना चाहिए. A little bit of caution is required. अगर आप यूएस के जो अभी पेपर्स आ रहे हैं, now they are saying कि India, Prime Minister Modi is there, so I'll read out what they have said. कहते हैं network security architecture में in the Indo-Pacific, which has the capability to stand up to China. That is what they want India to do, right? To stand up to China. No, I should not be, a proxy to the US game with China. There's strategic competition between the US and China. अभी हमको strategically smart होना पड़ेगा to balance it out to make sure that our interests. We are a large nation. We are a growing power. There's no doubt about it. We are there right now. In the competitive nations, we have to have a rightful place. लेकिन उसको हम बैलेंस करना पड़ेगा और ये बैलेंस बहुत जरूरी है और मेरे ख्याल से हम ये कर भी रहे हैं. और एक और चीज मैं बताना चाहूँगा. I will read out from an American paper. This is Steve Chan है professor in the University of Colorado. उन्होंने recently book publish करी है. चाइना यूएस के power transition theory writer है वो. और वो लिखते हैं China's recent growth has called attention to the power transition theory, which contends that the danger of a major war is the greatest when a rising dissatisfied challenger threatens to overtake a declining satisfied hegemon. Right? So, इसमें I will not say that the US is declining power, but it is not a growing power. Okay. And China, irrespective of what generally this thing is, but we have to give the best or the worst option to China, that China will continue to grow, maybe at a lesser pace. I don't see actually China declining right now because Xi Jinping is in a man in a hurry, and that is, I think, China's major problem right now. And Xi Jinping जो है माओ की philosophy follow करते हैं. माओ की philosophy बड़ी अच्छी थी, fight talk. तो एक जगह तो fight कर रहे हैं, दूसरी जगह talk कर रहे हैं. Xi Jinping is also, he's a great follower of Mao's philosophies. If you want to understand Xi Jinping, आप माओ को पढ़िए. काफी सारी चीजें माओ के philosophy देते हैं. तो fight talk. अभी जो परसों जो उनका सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट गए हैं, जो उनके वहां से आ रहा है, इंडिकेटर्स आ रहे हैं, अच्छे इंडिकेटर्स आ रहे हैं. अभी नवंबर में विजिट है शी जिनपिंग की यूएस में, देखने क्या होता है. तो आई थिंक इन द एंड आई विल गो विद both General Ahuja and Sahgal, but as an Indian I would like to balance my interests rather than get involved in the balance of power game.
आई थिंक आप सब लोगों ने जो बोला है वो इसमें दो राय नहीं है कि इंडिया हैज टू बी अ बैलेंसिंग पावर और बैलेंसिंग के ऊपर ज्यादा ध्यान होना चाहिए. और यहाँ हमें नहीं पढ़ना चाहिए कि वी गेट इनटू अ डायरेक्ट रिलेशनशिप, क्योंकि आजकल जो खास करके पिछले एक हफ्ते 10 दिन से और मेरे ख्याल में अगले 10-15 दिन तक ये चलता रहेगा कि यूएसए से जो आवाज निकल के आ रहे हैं वो ये चाहते हैं इंडिया इज फर्मली इन यूएस कैंप और ये डायड बन जाए और हम रशिया और चाइना के अगेंस्ट काम करें यूएसए के साथ, राइट. और आपने जो, इसीलिए मैंने ये सवाल उठाया था, हमने सब ये बात किया था कि ये हो नहीं सकता और इट इज नॉट इन इंडियाज इंटरेस्ट. हमारे इंटरेस्ट में नहीं है कि हम ऐसे एक कॉन्फ्रंटेशनल रिलेशनशिप तैयार करें बोथ विद रशिया एंड चाइना. हालांकि हमारे साथ चाइना के साथ टेंशंस है, but it should not become adversarial completely without a turn back. Right. I'll now switch to the second question, right, which we will consider. अगर आप देखेंगे भारत और चाइना दोनों सिविलाइजेशनल पावर्स हैं, राइट. और दुनिया के हिस्ट्री में कभी दो सिविलाइजेशनल पावर्स जो साथ साथ जिसके कंटेंशियस बॉर्डर्स हैं और क्लोज प्रॉक्सिमिटी में है, वो कभी साथ उभरे नहीं, राइट? अगर ऐसे, और हमारा एक प्रॉब्लम भी हुआ है, एक 62 में एक मेजर वॉर भी हो गया और बाकी किटपिट होते रहे, और 2020 में एक मेजर कॉन्फ्रंटेशन भी हो गया। तो इस लिहाज से देखा जाए, क्या चाइना के साथ लड़ाई इनविटेबल है? क्योंकि ये हमारे जो स्ट्रेटेजिक सर्कल्स में और पब्लिक सर्कल्स में भी यही उम्मीद है कि एक दिन हमारे लड़ाई हो सकता है। अगर if it is inevitable or is it possible, if it is so, इसके साथ what are the guardrails we should be built into our current situation so that हम लड़ाई की ओर ना चले, right? लड़ाई ना हो। सर, आई रिक्वेस्ट ब्रिगेडियर अरुण सहगल टू प्लीज आपका विचार बताइए, उसके बाद हम बाकियों के विचार लेंगे।
Sir, you asked a very difficult question, and I am afraid I'm not a. Okay, let me try and answer this question. First and foremost, I wanted to say is that on the previous issue of God, diet coming up, uh, I did not say it. I forgot to mention it. Uh, the in global geopolitical terms, every country is strategic posturing. Is strategic posturing going on right now, rather than strategic alignments. Everybody is trying to fish out each other. Uh, that's one point. The second point is, as far as India-China relationships are concerned, there are two, three dynamics which are at play. We are both the civilizational states, like you rightly said. If you analyze the Chinese rhetoric or Chinese writing, etc., etc., Chinese never talk about maximum they go is to teach India a lesson along the line of actual control, but they are never sort of indicating territorial ambitions against India. Uh, there is a logic behind this, and my thinking basically is this: is that China remains, despite the fact it has got the very strong military, it is very strong economic power, it remains a regional power. It is not a global power. It cannot be a global power till such time it develops global credibilities and global credentials. And you develop global credibility and credentials not by having supply chains and economic relationships with the West or United States, but you have to create a global presence. China is now in the process of creating its global presence. In its creation of this global presence, China is trying to look at two, three areas of how do I proceed further. And when you start looking at from the Chinese perspective, sitting in Beijing, how do I proceed further? Like I said earlier, sir, that on the east there is a wall of of strong alliances being built against him by an offshore power or offshore balancer, United States, along with its allies, which is ensuring that the maximum Chinese can do is follow an offensive defensive strategy. Now you come down into the South China Sea, an area which it has surreptitiously taken control of, which everybody allowed China to do it. It started playing this 9-line game and it has succeeded. That has been done primarily to create a space for its movement across out of this conundrum of the South China Sea into the wider oceans, primarily in this case in the Indian Ocean. So, from the Chinese perspective, the Indian Ocean region, along with this partnership, like Gen Ahuja was talking about, that is creating equities in our neighborhood, through those equities is creating a strategy of countermanding India, not so much in the line of actual control, but in the maritime domain through the Indian Ocean region. The problem with the Chinese is this: And again, they have to shake out of South China Sea, enter the Indian Ocean region, and then find strategic spaces which they try to create. Hambantota is one, Gwadar is another. They tried in Maldives, they tried in Mauritius, and now then they're trying to go into relationship with Iran, etc., etc., etc. When India looks at the China challenge, we have this tendency to look at only from the continental domain. The Chinese challenge in the continental domain is a holding operation. It's a diversionary tactic. I will not solve the boundary issue. I will not solve the boundary issue primarily because I want to put India under pressure. But that was the tactic till about 5 to 6 years back. Now, what you have done is through your programs, we understand how they are, but from the Chinese perspective is that when you talk about their forward villages and infrastructure, etc., your infrastructure is bringing you closer to the last line of the mountain chain from where you descend into the valley. And the problem for the Chinese is that after the 70 years, they have not yet managed to contain the Tibet and integrate Tibet fully into its psychological integration of Tibet has not yet taken place. And added to that, further northwestwards is the Xinjiang and Kashgar, etc., etc. So the area starting from North Kashgar, coming towards Tibet, southwestern China, is an area of a strategic vulnerability for the Chinese. It is strategic vulnerability, not so much or more, but it is because the population, the 9% of the Chinese minorities who live up in about say 35% of the Chinese territory are operating from this region. This is their home. So Hanization of this region has been done. The whole idea of this new permit system, the new laws, etc., is basically to further integrate the region through diktats. Something which we tried to do in the Northeast and then realized it was not possible, and then we came back to a more democratic order and decided that try to integrate. So this is the situation. So India and China, from Chinese perspective, a 7.5 trillion or a $10 trillion economy in India by 2030, supported by the United States uh, strong partnership, in which you develop an intrinsic capacities. And today I was having a discussion on missile force, etc., with some people in the system. Is that if you would develop credible missile force of 1,500 kilometers or say, and reach their intermediate zone and bring it under your strategic influence, it hurts the Chinese. It impacts the Chinese strategic balance. So what is happening is from the Chinese perspective is to utilize all efforts, capacities, capabilities, etc., to contain India and constrain India and prevent India from becoming a challenger, not now, tomorrow, day after, but by 2030 and beyond. Added to that is the fact is, like I had mentioned in my talk on China, is that there is a large amount of population within China. This thing is that India is a secondary direction. We have had our civilizational contacts with India. Why are we fighting India? Why is it that Indian perspective, India is being looked at as a challenger? And here, there are two schools of thoughts in China. There is a school of thought that India is becoming an aggressive power driven by its alliances with the West. And the second school of thought is intrinsically, strategically, India is a status quoist power, non expansionist power. India will not countermand China as long as China has a decent relationship with India. Therefore, what the Chinese continue to do is this is tell us we will resolve the boundary issue But let's get back to the basic bilateral relationship. And we are saying that till we resolve the boundary issue, we cannot have a bilateral relationships. But there's a contradiction in terms here, and this is something important to note. The contradiction in terms is, take the United States. It swallows pride, sends Blinken over there. He doesn't get a very good reception. The readouts are not very good. Chinese actually read the riot act to him. And if you notice, Xi Jinping was sitting on a higher pedestal and he was looking down at this thing. And that's an interesting aspect which many people have noted. Yet, they want to create guardrails to ensure that the relationship of the China with the China doesn't get blown over. What we have done is, by our stand with the Chinese, we have put all eggs on one basket and driven by public opinion that till such time the boundary issue is resolved to its satisfaction, that is status quo ante or anything close to status quo ante which is acceptable, and in this case Depsang Chumar, etc., which are strategically important, so even General Bhatia and General Ahuja and you are all very clear about, is the situation is this. How do we proceed further? We have taken a political stand. A political stand is that we cannot go ahead with China till such time there is a resolution, in our perception, all CBMs are dead. There are no CBMs now functional with the China. So therefore, rebuild the CBMs and then we will talk. The Chinese say we have advocate, let's say, strategic stability along the borders. We will continue our discussions and build it up. Let's talk and let's start the bilateral dialogue. Now, this is the dilemma that faces both the countries, and this is something which has to be resolved politically. And I don't see it happening anytime soon, whether in the SCO meeting or in the G20. And it'll be now that's one of the test is a, will Xi Jinping come? Two, will we have? I mean, if Xi Jinping come, we'll have to have a bilateral dialogue. And in the bilateral dialogue, what are we going to say beyond our stated positions? And if we're going to stick to the stated position, then the bilateral dialogue has no meaning. So I think I'll close here, stop here, and I talk.
I think you made the last point is very important. आपने last point बताया. अगर शी जिनपिंग यहाँ आएगा तो कुछ तो नतीजा निकलना चाहिए. अगर नतीजा नहीं निकलेगा तो उसका आने की भी जरूरत नहीं है. और इसीलिए एक मीटिंग तो टल गया, दूसरे मीटिंग के लिए देखेंगे. सर, जनरल भाटिया सर, योर टेक सर एंड योर व्यूज.
At the cost of repetition, I agree with Brig Arun Sahgal. I think when you talk of civilization, one of the problems is that China does not understand India. Not that Indians understand China also. Right? मेरे थोड़ा समझ से बाहर है. When we had a growing relationship till 2019 अक्टूबर में, बड़ा अच्छा relationship हमारा चल रहा था. इकोनॉमिक चल रहा था, डिप्लोमेटिक चल रहा था, मिलिट्री टू मिलिट्री होते थे, हैंड इन हैंड एक्सरसाइज होते थे. जनरल आहूजा भी गए हैं, मैं भी गया हूँ चाइना. एंड बड़े अच्छे सीडीएम्स थे. 2013 में हमने बीसीडीएस बॉर्डर डिफेंस कोऑपरेटिव बीडीसीए साइन करा, बॉर्डर डिफेंस कोऑपरेटिव एग्रीमेंट साइन किया 2013 में आफ्टर दिस, राइट. एंड सडनली जब ये 2020 में अप्रैल मई में जब ये हुआ, तो आई थिंक चाइना का ये हिमालयन ब्लंडर मोमेंट है. They are now pushing India away from China. Whereas I think in the long term, China will need India as much as India needs China, or rather more so in this power matrix जो आप बता रहे हैं. और उन्होंने हमको धकेल सा दिया है towards the US, and that China will regret in the long term. Right? Because India has a balancing power. And India would easily balance the two and not be this thing. So I think China has done the Himalayan blunder, the 62 moment, China का moment है, ये Himalayan blunder कर दिया उन्होंने. अभी उनको भी लगता है कि इसको China के लिए face बहुत important है. Now they need a face saving strategy, a face saving strategy they will not get. इनके इंटरनल डायमेंशंस भी हैं. They can't be seen as weak, and they cannot be seen, and they cannot take on India. The only, I think, only thing I would like to add out here is India will have to understand that we cannot have a weak posturing in with the Chinese. There is a continental Indian Ocean region. We have talked about 40 strategy the other day also. We, you know, China को जो हमारी strategy है deterrence की, it is from a position of greater strength. Right. Otherwise, major problem हो सकती है, irrespective of whatever we are, because China is China, and we haven't understood China's strategic intent. Honestly, मैं बता रहा हूँ जितने latest discussions हो गए हैं, जो उन्होंने किया है, उसकी strategic intent अभी तक काफी लोगों को समझ नहीं आया. आगे तो ये बोलते हैं because of the DBO show तो 20 साल से बन रहा है. That's hardly we know what that road is all about. That cannot be a strategic intent कि DBO road बन गया है, show DBO road तो उसकी वजह से चाइना नहीं किया, मैंने बात बोलते हैं, ठीक है. तो वहां पर हमको देखना पड़ेगा चाइना का स्ट्रेटेजिक इंटेंट क्या है in the short term, in the mid term, in the long term, and how do we then meet the China challenge and better China aggressiveness. That is the key challenge for India, irrespective of civilization linkages, irrespective of what they talk, what they say, CBMs, agreements, जो भी मर्जी बोल लें, बट ये हमको मसल से उसको करना पड़ेगा. इंडियन ओशन रीजन में स्ट्रेटेजिक वल्नरेबिलिटीज हैं, जैसे मैंने सेकंड बोल रहे थे. We should not be only fixed towards the continent. We'll have to have an overall strategy, getting all together, and that is what I think we'll have to get a general.
थैंक यू सर. आई थिंक यू मेड आपने दो चार इंटरेस्टिंग पॉइंट आपने बताया कि वी आर इन अ लॉक जैम व्हिच वी हैव टू टेक केयर ऑफ एंड वी कांट ब्लिंक, बट एट द सेम टाइम वी कांट टेक इट टू अ लेवल वेयर इट बिकम्स अ फायर फाइट. जनरल आहूजा सर,
No blinking, no break mention.
नो, यस सर, ये हमने बात भी किया पहले भी. So जनरल आहूजा सर, योर व्यूज ऑन दिस.
See, what has just been covered, I think, is the crux of the discussion of this global power matrix that we've been having. That finally, at the end of the day, how do we manage our relationship with China? Because, like I had said, we have been put into a geographic frontline with a major power. Now, the dilemma that Brigadier Sahgal brought out, that today if we maintain that we will not have any other, till the time we settle the boundary question, these issues, rest of the issues, it will have its shadow on this. Now, this is a very challenging thing for us to address. Now, the question is, till the time it gets addressed, the basic foundation that, accommodating with China does not help. You have to respond with power. That is the underlying thing, that even if yesterday, even when we had confidence building measures, border peace and tranquility agreements, even then, I think all of us who have been in this business of soldiering tried to suggest to people, don't lower your guard, build your capability. And that remains the basic cardinal thing even today. The second aspect is that by building capability, while you deter, but at the same time, we have to make a distinction between management of our borders and between preparing our capability for all out war. Now, management of borders, yes, our confidence building measures have gone down the drain. As General Bhatia had mentioned, they've done a Himalayan blunder by ruining all these agreements. But still, I think the prudence demands that we salvage whatever is left of it. There is still merit in diffusing Yangtzes and Tawangs by having flag meetings than shooting at each other. And give a little time. Now, like we said, that there is going to be the dilemma if and when Xi Jinping comes to India. Now, what I look at it is very personally that we had friction points. 5 of the friction points we've sorted out. Our friction point in Debsang, Demchok, well, they continue. I think the first and the foremost step there is to disengage from there, to bring it to status quo ante at even these two left off places. That gives us a starting point. Thereafter, let's build on it. We have agreed to have buffer zones at other places. Tomorrow, the two governments decide that with the advice of the military, with the all concerned security planners, we decide to have buffer zones even in these areas. Well, so be it. Let's leave it out. Leave it to the wisdom of professionals today in uniform or the national security planners. But the fact is, let's manage this. Let's take incremental steps, because ultimately the geographies cannot be changed. And finally, I would like to say is that I think we've been very mature. And let's also grant to the maturity of our friends, whether it's the Americans or it's the Russians. We have not gone to become the camp followers, even of America, in containing China. We've said that we are maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. We are not looking at containing any other country. So we know what are the realities of a geographic neighbor, and our partners appreciate what is the reality of India sitting here in this geographic location. So I think if we maturely handle this relationship, we extend understanding to our partners extend understanding to us, and India and China realize that yes, we will have competition, we will have issues of conflict, but we will have to live like neighbors. But let's take incremental steps and we can build on it. And time is a great healer, leveler, whatever we may say. And perhaps if during this coming meet we decide to go to status quo ante in these two remaining fraction points, perhaps it may give a building block for taking it further. That's my suggestion.
थैंक यू. आपने बहुत अच्छी तरीके से ये सब एक्सप्लेन किया, आप तीनों ने. मैं ये इस पार्ट ऑफ द डिस्कशन में इस तरीके से क्लोज करूंगा कि जैसे हम ऐसे विवाद कर रहे हैं, उसी तरीके से मेरे ख्याल में कहीं ना कहीं चाइना में भी ये सोच हो रहा होगा. और इसीलिए उन्होंने मेरे ख्याल में सबसे पहले बार ग्लोबल टाइम्स ने मैंने ये कल बात भी किया था कि पहली बार ग्लोबल टाइम्स हैज सेड दैट इंडिया इज अ रीजनल पावर, राइट. ये आज तक मैंने कभी सुना पढ़ा नहीं, और ये एडिटोरियल में उन्होंने लिखा है. तो देयर इज अ चेंज व्हिच इज हैपनिंग. The only problem in this is that in this thing of no blinking, no brinkmanship हमारी तरफ से, but we have to factor in the thing that Xi Jinping is a man in a hurry, right? And is a man in a hurry, and if he decides कल के दिन that he puts a little more pressure on the LAC to make way Indian Ocean region में, then it might be in a problem. और जैसे हम चारों ने ये बात किया, इसको हम तभी टाल पाएंगे जब हमारा शक्ति बढ़ेगा, मिलिट्री शक्ति. जैसे जनरल सहगल साहब ने बताया, वी नीड लॉन्ग रेंज सिस्टम्स. जिस दिन वो लॉन्ग रेंज सिस्टम्स आ जाएंगे, वो अपने आप डिटरेंस हो जाएंगे. अगर हमारा नॉर्मल मिलिट्री पावर, बेसिक फंडामेंटल मिलिट्री पावर अलोंग द एलएसी अगर हम मजबूत करेंगे, जैसे हमारा पुराना डीजीएमओ और पुराना एडीजीएमओ ने बताया, तो देन देयर इज अ यू नो situation where we can handle the LAC in a slightly better manner. And that's the guardrails which I think we need to build, because बाकी diplomatic guardrails हुए, economic guardrails हैं, वो अपने आप बनते जाएंगे. And we'll have to see this year. I think इस साल थोड़ा crucial होगा, क्योंकि जी जिनपिंग ने यहाँ आना है, हमारे प्राइम मिनिस्टर वहां गए, इसका क्या परिणाम होगा और चाइना के ऊपर, और चाइना का क्या सोच विचार उभर के आएगा, ये देखने वाली बात है. वी आर लिविंग इन इंटरेस्टिंग टाइम्स, राइट. मेरा आज का जो तीसरा मुद्दा है, और ये फाइनल मुद्दा है आज के लिए, ये है कि ये अच्छी बात है कि हम बोल रहे हैं कि इंडिया इज अ ग्रोइंग पावर, पर हमारे प्रॉब्लम्स कुछ हैं, और हमारे प्रॉब्लम्स जब तक हम ओवरकम नहीं करेंगे, तो हम एक बैलेंसिंग पावर ऑफ स्टेबल बैलेंसिंग पावर उभर के नहीं आएंगे. मैं अपना डीजीएमओ साहब या जनरल भाटिया साहब से दरखास्त करूंगा कि आप क्या सोचते हो कि जो इम्पोर्टेंट मुद्दे हैं जो इंडिया मस्ट फोकस ऑन, so that power which has arrived and not a power with a potential always. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. This is a very बहुत वास्ट सा क्वेश्चन है ये.
नहीं, आप ये आपकी बात मैं मानता हूँ, ये बड़ा वास्ट का क्वेश्चन है. आप इम्पोर्टेंट पॉइंट्स के ऊपर अगर आप फोकस भी करेंगे, ताकि दो व्यूज देंगे, that I think will do the trick, sir.
इंटरनल इश्यू में सबसे मेजर हमारा जो ग्रोथ ट्रेजेक्टरी है, उसमें हाउ अपना जो डेमोग्राफी डिविडेंड है उसको कैसे हैंडल करेंगे, मेन हमारी जो इश्यू है ये रहेगी. इफ वी कैन गिव अ फोकस जो अपना डेमोग्राफिक डिविडेंड को, जो हमारे तो नियरली 750 मिलियन पीपल हैं इन द वर्किंग एज ग्रुप, अगर हम उसको कैसे हार्नेस करेंगे, बिकॉज दैट विल लीड अस टू better economy will lead us better security and also well-being of our people, which is very important. Okay. We are taking people out of poverty to the next level. In the end, हमारा aim क्या है? India should be a modern, prosperous and secure nation. ठीक है. और अगर हम secure नहीं होंगे, peace और stability नहीं होगी, economic development नहीं होगी हमारी. और economic development नहीं होगी, peace and security नहीं होगी. So it's a अंडा पहले या मुर्गी पहले वाली बात है. For security, you need economic development, and for economic development, you need security. तो मेजर जो इश्यू जो मैं देख रहा हूँ अभी, वो ये देख रहा हूँ कि हम अपने डेमोग्राफिक डिविडेंड को कैसे ऑप्टिमाइज करें. उसके लिए हमको एजुकेशन चाहिए, उसके लिए हमको एम्प्लॉयमेंट चाहिए, और हमको यूथ के लिए डायरेक्शन चाहिए. दैट इज वन इश्यू. इन द सिक्योरिटी डोमेन, बिकॉज सिक्योरिटी इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट लिंक्ड है, हमारे इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी चैलेंजेस हैं, हमें कोई शक नहीं होना चाहिए उसमें. जम्मू एंड कश्मीर आज हमारे वायलेंस लेवल से सब क्रिटिकल है, लेकिन नेटवर्क अभी भी है वहां पर मौजूद. सो दैट नेटवर्क्स कैन बी रिवाइव्ड, एंड इट इज अ एक्सटर्नली सपोर्टेड प्रॉक्सी वॉर बाय पाकिस्तान. और फॉर्चुनेटली बिकॉज द सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक्स, उसके जो प्रिसिशन एयर स्ट्राइक्स की बालाकोट के बाद, उनके बाद हमने पाकिस्तान की तरफ से कोई हाई प्रोफाइल अटैक हमने आफ्टर 2019 नहीं देखा. 2016 2019 में फरवरी में हुआ पुलवामा, उसके बाद हमने हाई प्रोफाइल अटैक नहीं देखा है. तो देयर इज अ गैप आउट देयर, बट लाइक मैं ये नहीं कहता दोबारा नहीं हो सकते हैं, लेकिन हमको जो पाकिस्तान की जो स्ट्रेटजी है उसको ठीक रखना पड़ेगा. विच इज अ 3P स्ट्रेटजी: प्रोएक्टिव, यूनिटिव एंड प्रीएम्प्टिव. ठीक है. तो ये हमारे इंटरनल डायनेमिक्स है, जो उसको पाकिस्तान को हमको एक कैप करना पड़ेगा. दूसरे इंटरनल डायनेमिक हमारे हैं नॉर्थ ईस्ट. नॉर्थ ईस्ट में अगर आप देखा जाए, मेरे हिसाब से जैसे लॉ एंड ऑर्डर, उसमें इंसिडेंट बची नहीं है, लेकिन चाइना हैज द कैपेसिटीज एंड द कैपेबिलिटीज टू rekindle द प्रॉब्लम्स इन द नॉर्थ ईस्ट. तो ये बड़ा मेजर सिक्योरिटी चैलेंज है, और खास तौर से सिलीगुड़ी कॉरिडोर ये सिक्योरिटी चैलेंज है. उसके अलावा जहाँ तक इकोनॉमी का सवाल है, हम जो मर्जी बोल लें, ग्रोथ रेट वगैरह सब ठीक है. वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट वी आर स्टिल येट टू अचीव द 5 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी. जब तक हमारी इकोनॉमी होगी, हमारी सिक्योरिटी नहीं होगी. और मेरे ख्याल से हम अपने सिक्योरिटी पे जो पैसा खर्च कर रहे हैं मिलिट्री पे खास तौर से, वो एडिक्वेट नहीं है। गिवन आर थ्रेट्स जो हमको मिटिगेट करनी है, जो हमको मीट करनी है, वो एडिक्वेट नहीं है। वी हैव टू परचेज, आई यूज द वर्ड परचेज, मैं ट्रांजैक्शन की बात कर रहा हूँ, बड़ीगिरी की बात कर रहा हूँ मैं। वी हैव टू परचेज पीस थ्रू प्रिपेयर्डनेस। Armed forces are not meant to fight wars, sorry. Armed forces are meant to prevent wars. Armed forces are meant to deter wars. Nations fight wars as a last resort. ठीक है, हमको सिक्योरिटी चाहिए एंड वी हैव टू परचेज पीस थ्रू प्रिपेयर्डनेस, एंड लेस देन 2% अगर जीडीपी हम देंगे, हमारे पास गैप्स है उसमें, हमको फिल करने पड़ेंगे। हमको आत्मनिर्भरता को और जोर देना पड़ेगा, मेक इन इंडिया को जोर देना पड़ेगा। अभी जनरल आहूजा बता रहे थे, उन्होंने बहुत काम किया था उससे। 2013 जुलाई को हमने एक सैंक्शन लिया था सीसीएस से फॉर एक्रिशन फोर्सेस, ठीक है, जिसको हम लूजली माउंटेन स्ट्राइक कोर बोलते हैं। 90,000 एडिशनल मैन पावर थी उसमें फॉर द नॉर्दर्न बॉर्डर्स। 2013 की बात कर रहा हूँ मैं। 8 साल में हमको 67,000 करोड़ में ये चाहिए था, 8 साल के ऊपर 8,000 करोड़ प्लस माइनस हर साल। और वो करते तो 2020 तक 2021 तक हमारे पूरे कैपेबिलिटीज बन जाते थे। हमने, बिकॉज हमारे इकोनॉमी नहीं थी अफोर्ड कर पाते, वी गॉट द सैंक्शंस, बट फाइनेंशियल एलोकेशन नहीं हुई है। करेक्ट मी इफ आई एम रॉन्ग, आपने बहुत काम किया था उसमें, ठीक है, आपका मेन टास्क ही यही था मेरे ख्याल से। तो अगर हम अपने मिलिट्री पे, अपने डिफेंस प्रिपेयर्डनेस में, ऑपरेशन रेडी में पैसा नहीं खर्च करेंगे, उसको नहीं करेंगे, तो मेरे ख्याल से वी विल आस्क फॉर ट्रबल। तो ये 3-4 चीजें हैं मेन। इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी चैलेंजेस हैं हमारे पास इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट एंड वी नीड इकोनॉमिक और सिक्योरिटी। अभी आप इजराइल को देख लीजिए, उनका बजट देख लीजिए, आप पाकिस्तान को देख लीजिए, उनका बजट देख, चाइना का बजट देख लीजिए, यूएसए का बजट देख लीजिए, जापान का बजट देख लीजिए, ठीक है। और हमारी थ्रेट्स तो मल्टीपल नहीं है, इंटरनल भी है, एक्सटर्नल भी है। तो इसको करने के लिए हमको इकोनॉमिक के साथ साथ हमें देखना पड़ेगा। मैं मानता हूं कि एट द नेशनल लेवल कंपीटिंग प्रायोरिटीज हैं, और हमको अपनी पॉपुलेशन की वेलबींग देखनी है, हमको उनको गरीबी से बाहर निकालना है, हमको चाहिए हम। लेकिन उसके साथ साथ जब तक सिक्योरिटी नहीं होगी, हमारी इन्वेस्टमेंट्स नहीं आएंगी। अगर इन्वेस्टमेंट्स नहीं आएंगी, इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट नहीं होगी, इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट नहीं होगा, सिक्योरिटी नहीं होगी। तो ये बड़ा सा एक सारा ये जो गेम है, ये हमको देखना पड़ेगा। ये मेजर चैलेंजेस जो हमारे यहीं पर हैं, इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट, एजुकेशन, एम्प्लॉयमेंट होता है।
Right, sir. बहुत thank you, sir, for your views. I go with you 100%. और मेरा भी मानना ये है कि हमारा अर्थव्यवस्था, जैसे मेरा पूरा विश्वास है, वो बढ़ेगा. That's history and that's the way our nation is built. Right? I'm not worried about that. The point जो आपने बोला, which is I think the crux of the issue, that the time has come. अगर हम एक बैलेंसिंग पावर बनना चाहते हैं, we have to go past our potential of being a potential. We have to invest more in our security, both internal and external. तभी हम जाके कुछ कैपेसिटीज बढ़ा सकते हैं, which make us apart. So your views, General Ahuja, sir, on this whole story of internal weaknesses, which you think are key, because just touch upon the key ones.
General Bhatia has covered them very comprehensively. Let me just highlight 3-4 points. Number one, we have to focus on internal issues with external dimensions. That has to be our priority. And we have to be very mindful of maintaining internal security in our border states and in our states which are geographically farther away from the capital, from the center of power. Irrespective of the shade of the government that may be there in any particular state. I mean, this is a national imperative. Next is, we have to be cognizant of the power play that is going on in our immediate neighborhood. जहां पे मेजर पावर गेम प्ले की जा रही है, पर्टिकुलरली वहां पर उसकी जो एडजॉइनिंग स्टेट्स हैं, उनमें हमें सबसे ज्यादा केयरफुल रहना पड़ेगा। अगर हम देखते हैं कि वो हमारे नॉर्थ में कहीं नेपाल में कोई प्ले हो रहा है, हमें ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा। आजकल अगर आप रीसेंट राइटिंग्स पढ़ें, कुछ जो फॉरेन पॉलिसी के बारे में जो ज्यादा एनालिसिस हो रहा है, उसमें लोग जो डेवलपमेंट्स हो रही हैं म्यांमार के अंदर, उनको जो साउथ ईस्ट एशिया में इंडो चाइना का मतलब वियतनाम, कंबोडिया, लाओस रीजन में जो डेवलपमेंट्स हुई थी, जब हम 70s के अंदर बात किया करते थे कि फियर ऑफ द डोमिनो इफेक्ट दैट टाइम, आई मीन पीपल आर लिंकिंग दोज डेवलपमेंट्स देयर टू म्यांमार टुडे।
और कल
I mean,
नॉर्थ ईस्ट में आएगा।
right, wrong, whatever is happening, but this is the perception that is there, and these have implications on our states, on our territories. So let's be mindful that our external security and our internal security, they are very intricately linked to each other, and we should do that in order of priority. Many times, a thought, while we were discussing, a thought comes to my mind that we have to have in our minds something like the Richter scale of internal security or internal uh, or disturbances, insurgencies, or whatever we like to call them. We need to have a weighted matrix. And like I said, anything with secessionist tendencies, anything with external dimension should be the nation's first and foremost priority. That's all.
Thank you, sir. So your views, sir. Brigadier Sahgal, sir.
Okay, I'll be very quick. Two, three things. Fundamentally, India is on economic resurgence. We have what I call legacy threats that we continue to face. We have put in place a fairly elaborate Atmanirbhar program, which is slow, but it is taking shape. So, what is required? What is required is for India is consolidation of political power, consolidation of economic power, and consolidation of security power. And that requires that we have to ensure, like both my other colleagues have said, that we have to ensure that our regional neighborhood and our neighborhood policy is such that we maintain a degree of balance, degree of cooperation, and degree of ensuring that they do not upset. The domino effect should not affect India because of any of these reasons. Therefore, dissuasive deterrence, integrated deterrence, whatever you want to call, whichever word you want to pick up from the United States, but I would say a dissuasive deterrence on our continental way, a strong, credible capacity built up on our maritime domain, but which cannot be done initially. So we need to have a relationships with the United States and other equal partners who provide well with the maritime domain initiative and maritime domain awareness and security, and use the next 10 years period of consolidating Indian power. Politically, we have to create a degree of political consolidation and coherence in which political parties do not fight among themselves and they all work cohesively towards the idea of India. And that's where we need to work on. We have a huge amount of vociferous and tendency, with divisive tendency amongst ourselves. We need to overcome them. We have, after a huge amount of hard work, huge amount of capability, the way look at the way we handled COVID. I think it's exemplary the way we handled COVID, and it was all, and we built up capacities. We did it because we were all involved in doing that, and they were without partisanship. Now that's the kind of relationship we need to have. India is on the march. India is on the go ahead. India needs to consolidate capacities, capabilities, and India has to have a credible dissuasive deterrence, whichever way you want to do it, and that is important for India. So internally, yes, we have challenges, but we also have strong opportunities, and this is the time and the period that we need to capitalize them. That's all I.
Can you give me a minute?
Please, sir. Please, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think I'll take off from what you said. Security की definition बदली हो. When you talk about security, it is comprehensive national security. क्या हमारे structures और systems उसको further करते हैं? मेरे ख्याल से there's a time to rethink. I'm just giving a broad idea. Is it a time to have a Ministry of Security? अभी देखें मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ होम अफेयर्स अपना चलता है बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट में. अब नदर्न बॉर्डर देख लीजिए, एलएसी देख लीजिए, आईटीबीपी बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट करता है, आर्मी वहां पर है, दोनों के बीच में कोऑर्डिनेशन है, ऑपरेशन है, लेकिन सिस्टम नहीं है. वो फंक्शनल लेवल पर है. वो जनरल आहूजा 4 कोर में थे, मैं 33 कोर में था, तो हमने चलो भाईबंदी करते थे, लेकिन इंटरमीडिएट हेडक्वार्टर्स से कॉन्ट्रडिक्टरी ऑर्डर्स आते हैं, हायर कॉन्ट्रडिक्टरी ऑर्डर्स आते हैं. मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ फाइनेंस वो अपने धुन में घूमता है, ठीक है. एमईए और एमओडी में है तालमेल है, बट इज दिस अ टाइम टू हैव अ मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ सिक्योरिटी which is all encompassing, looking after comprehensive national security, which is all encompassing, and that has all elements of national power in it. MEA है, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ फाइनेंस है, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ होम अफेयर्स के आईएस डिवीजन है, बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट डिवीजन है. मैंने कहा सब पे सब दे दो, बट आईएस और बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट डिवीजन मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ सिक्योरिटी में आना चाहिए. मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ डिफेंस तो है ही है, एमईए की रिप्रेजेंटेटिव होनी चाहिए, बिकॉज़ एमईए इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. उसके अलावा इंफॉर्मेशन ब्रॉडकास्टिंग मिनिस्ट्री, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल इंफॉर्मेशन पॉइंट. Are we catering to the अपना डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी? That has to come in. अब उन टेक्निकल विजन देख लीजिए 2030 वाला, वो कितना कहता है डिफेंस. I think so. All this combined, it's a thought which I wanted to propagate on your platform for further discussion, to have a structure and system which is future looking. कल के लिए हमें तैयार रहना चाहिए. Technological.
Right, yes, I completely agree with you.
Totally agree, sir.
Sir, yours, sir? Anything you want to say, sir? Right.
I said
Right,
I
sir.
generally
The
agree.
point- Yeah. Now the issue which comes out of this discussion on the internal factors which we have to stress on, कि हमारा सोच विचार बदले करने की जरूरत है. चाहे वो पॉलिटिकल सोच विचार हो, क्या चाहे वो हमारा अर्थव्यवस्था का हो, चाहे हमारा how do we deal with our own people. And the important point which General Ahuja said, those people who live far away from Delhi, at all four corners you have different viewpoints. How do you get them together, right? In fact, sitting in a state which has a completely different viewpoints on many issues which are burning in Delhi. So there is change which is happening. As we change and as we try to become a power, हमें अपना इंटरनल सोच भी बदली करने की जरूरत है, हमारा इंटरनल स्ट्रक्चर्स बदली करने की जरूरत है. तो इस मामले में I would like to see, I would really like to examine the Chinese model, because उन्होंने काफी हद तक ये किया है, ये इंटरनल चेंज. और जो जनरल भाटिया बोल रहे हैं about the Ministry of Security, etc., they have this magic figure called the United Works Department, right, which breaks all these barriers and stitches this together. And जैसे उन्होंने सही बताया कि जो इंफॉर्मेशन ब्रॉडकास्टिंग मिनिस्ट्री है, हमारे पास सबसे बड़ा और सबसे इफेक्टिव इंफॉर्मेशन एंड ब्रॉडकास्टिंग मिनिस्ट्री है, which doesn't build our own narratives, right? It only conveys others' narratives to us. So there are a lot of internal reform which is required. Having said this, sir, I think we have raised the issues which are required for this third question, and I'll leave it at that. और मैं सबको बताना चाहता हूँ, ये जो 3 क्वेश्चन मैंने निकाला है, आज सोच समझ के मैं पिछले 4 दिन से मैं सोच रहा था कि भाई फाइनल एनालिसिस में क्या हम बात क्या करें, राइट? ये पहले जो 3 दिन जो हमने 4 दिन हमने बात किया रशिया के बारे में, चाइना के बारे में और रूस के बारे में, इट वाज ऑन द पावर मैट्रिक्स. आज जो हमने बात किया और पहले दिन जो हमने बात किया जो ब्रिगेडियर सहगल साहब के साथ, दिस इज कंसर्निंग इंडिया. आज अगर आप देखेंगे ये तीनों क्वेश्चंस जो इंडिया सेंट्रिक क्वेश्चंस हैं, और इस पावर बैलेंसिंग इक्वेशन में अगर इंडिया वांट्स टू बिकम a power of note and a balancing power of stability which is well respected and well trusted all over the world, हमें ये तीन चार इंटरनल इश्यूज के ऊपर फोकस करने की जरूरत है. ये तीन सवाल मैंने उठाया है, हो सकता है और भी सवाल हो, बट दैट वी विल लीव इट फॉर अनदर डे. So we'll take on a few questions if you don't mind. I know we have overshot, but I think it was well worth the discussion we've had. Uh, right. First, as Ashan says, Jai Hind sir, our administration has signed a major deal for TOT for four F414 engines today. This is a major milestone in our technological capability. All that we now need is the technology to build our own surface-to-surface submarines, SSNs, which is a major step towards becoming fully Atmanirbhar. Sir, General Ahuja sir, your take on it. I think I'll nominate people who could. Yeah, please, sir.
No, that's a very good development that we will be having the production of G414 engines. And as I was seeing in the chat box, there are comments coming on that they have not said about TOT, they've not said about various other things. Let's leave it. Let's leave it there. That you know one point which I had mentioned earlier in our discussion, that technology, I have said that twice, thrice before, technology doesn't come ready to use gift wrapped on a
Yeah.
table. It takes time to get absorbed. It's like food. उसको धीरे धीरे खाना होता है, धीरे धीरे हजम करना होता है. So it will come over a period of time. Some manufacturing will start, different components will come. It'll be semi knockdown kits, it'll be complete knockdown kits. The components will start coming. It requires patience, gestation period, but it's a good development that it will come here. Now, as far as other technologies, the question said SSNs. Well, there are perhaps 20 more technologies that we need. But as we go by and by, as we build confidence, that is how we go deeper in technology. I was just reading somewhere that there is a linkage between our signing the drones deal, our signing the G414 deal, and the subsequent technologies that will come, because it will be calibrated at a pace. So let's welcome what we've got. Let's be optimistic about what we've got. Let's also understand that you can't get everything right on the go. I was part of DTTI. Both sides expected moon tomorrow morning. Both sides didn't get enough of it. So let's see how it comes. It's a good development.
No, it will come. मेरे को कोई doubt नहीं है. It will come. Like I have operated, like with General Ahuja knows, I have operated and operationalized the M777 deal from the first word to the last word. Whoa, for me, I understand how these things happen, and this is a process. ये एक 10 साल लगेगा, right? 10 साल minimum लगेगा for all this to happen. 10 साल के बाद और कुछ होगा, और ये एक cycle है, चलता रहेगा. हमने at the turn of the century around 2004-5 we bought in the WLR. अगर आप उसको देखेंगे तो that was the first deal we did with USA, right? It was a bad deal. We had a lot of problems. The M777 taught us how to do good deals. Then I'm sure this and the next will teach us to do better deals. I'll leave it at that. The next question, again, Eshan says, so with our increasing technology and defense export capability, can we persuade countries like Nepal, Myanmar, and Vietnam to turn to us for their defense and tech needs instead of China and USA? Then Bhatia sir, you should be the best person qualified to deal with this, because these issues you would have confronted when you were the DGMO.
There's no doubt. अगर हम नहीं देंगे तो चाइना देगा. and we have the wherewithal which they require. But we compose दे रहे हैं. बांग्लादेश में हमने इन्वेस्ट नहीं किया था. हमारी प्रॉब्लम ये है कि हम आइडियोलॉजीज में बैठ जाते हैं. No, become very ideologic centric rather than interest centric. म्यांमार से हमने बहुत सालों तक डील नहीं किया. बांग्लादेश से हम थोड़ा दूर हो गए थे बीच में. अभी वापस आ रहे हैं. म्यांमार से भी वापस आ रहे हैं. हमने अपने सबक सीख लिए हैं, ऐसी बात नहीं सीखे हैं. And now we are offering them whatever we have, and there is a export market because we have. मैं आपको एक चीज बताऊं, and हम सब ने काफी एक्सपीरियंस कर रखा है इसमें. Even the DGRT, हमको लोग आते थे, फॉरेन वेंडर्स कहते थे आप हमारा इक्विपमेंट ट्रायल कर लो सर, मत लेना विषय. जो आपने ट्रायल कर लिया, इसका मतलब कि हमें एक तो पता है हमारा इक्विपमेंट कुछ भी कर सकता है, और दूसरा हम किसी भी देश को दे सकते हैं. यार ये इंडिया ने ट्रायल वैलिड कर दिया. हमारी ट्रायल वैलिडेशन इतनी अच्छी है कि फ्रॉम सी बोर्ड टू सियाचिन -50 to +50, तो वी ऑल बीन पार्ट ऑफ इट. तो वो हमारे पास ऐसा इक्विपमेंट है एंड विच इज कॉस्ट इफेक्टिव एंड विच इज सुटेबल टू ऑल द नेशन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट. आवर नेबरिंग नेशंस, नेपाल है, भूटान है, बांग्लादेश है, इंडो चाइना नेशंस हैं. And now our export is already growing. I don't know the exact figures, but I think it has already grown by about 100% or more, and it's on the growth rate. So I think government is doing its bit, and we need to export, and we need to meet the demands of the nations, but we should do it as a life cycle concept. उनको मई धारा में मत छोड़ना. जैसे कहीं के इक्विपमेंट हम दे देते हैं, जो इक्विपमेंट काम नहीं करता. हमारे साथ हुआ है, हमने किया हुआ है. दूसरों ने हमारे साथ किया, हमने भी दूसरों का किया हुआ है. ये इक्विपमेंट दे दो, उसको काम नहीं करता. दे जैसे अफगानिस्तान में बोलते, दे लेके जर्मन ब्रिजेस. अफगानिस्तान जर्मन है, ब्रिज बनाने को उन्होंने जर्मन ब्रिजेस बना दी वहां पर. तो सबने बोला भाई ऐसा मत करो, जब पानी आएगा, साथ में बोल्डर्स आएंगे तो नीचे चला जाएगा. तो जर्मन ब्रिजेस. तो हम बाहर जाते थे तो उनको बोलते ये इंडियन इक्विपमेंट ये खड़ा हुआ है यहाँ पर, तो रशियन इक्विपमेंट जैसे ही है. तो बट we should assure them of a support system of maintenance, and will give them a cost effectiveness.
Thank you, sir. I'm taking on a next question, which has a long preamble. I'd request Brig Arun Sahgal to respond to it. Because this gentleman has been writing, invariably he takes his comments off.
I know,
Today
I've
he's
seen
left
it.
those comments. So if you've seen the comments of shall I go to the question?
Yeah.
Question is, what are we offering US in return? Ashley called it the US policy of strategic altruism towards India, and how do you see this? And
we if you recollect, we discussed this issue at length. The point issue is, United States is not doing a favor to India by trying to become closer. Strategic embrace with India is part and parcel of the strategic dynamics which are operating in the Indo-Pacific at this point in time. I continue to stress the point is United States is a one flank power. Its flank is East Asia. It is all its equities are centered over there. The entire maritime Asia or what the rimland Asia is extending to the Indian Ocean region and South China Sea, where it has to contend with the Chinese power. United States does to maintain a strategic balance in Indo-Pacific and to retain the centrality of Indo-Pacific as an open, free and open domain. It has to need India. India's capacities and capabilities, whether there's something that you need to recognize, are extensively are being built up, and as of today also are adequate through its both geostrategic position, geopolitical position, and geopolitical linkages extend into the South China Sea and with Southeast Asia countries. So the point which the Americans are looking at is this: Japan Australia, Korea do not have adequate capacities of balancing China on its own. In fact, their capacities are directly linked to what the Americans have on the eastern flank. The western book end is empty. Western book end is contained today by India. And therefore, when India has 70,000 troops on the continental domain facing China and pushing off China, and we have 9 different patrols 24 by 7 along different points along the Indian Ocean, we are providing a degree of security to sea lines of communication from which a massive trade passes in this region. So what you are doing is the is that the pivot to Asia, as far as the United States is concerned, is incomplete without India being a strategic partner. And this is that strategic partnership we are talking about. I disagree with Professor Rajesh Gopalan when he talks about India in sort of a but that's what I will call is a JNU narrative. It's not a geo. He's a,
Yes, sir.
he's a bright guy. I respect him a lot, but the question is they fall prey to this narrative. They don't understand the narrative. We were in Indonesia the other day. Indonesians are saying they are very clear. They were talking about ASEAN centrality, blah blah blah. The question about ASEAN centrality is this: ASEAN does not have any security capacities, capabilities, and we told them and they understood it. We said that if there is trouble in the Taiwan Strait or there is trouble in the South China Sea, you all will get involved and you will become ipso facto partners in this. I mean, you'll be drawn into this conflict, which is of not your making. So, who provides a balancing factor in this region? India. And tomorrow, if India develops its capacities and capability the way it is doing, and we are also is my take is that we are also developing a long range strike capabilities on this line similar to anti-excess air denial strategy is that uh, fundamental point is if I launch 3 1,500 kilometers BrahMos missile tomorrow, which is going to come up in next 4 or 5 years, the simulations say we will get the aircraft carrier. They'll not be able to stop all three of them. At least, in maximum, they'll be able to stop one. So we will get the aircraft carrier. So the question basically is this: the Chinese are vulnerable when they get out of the South China Sea. Chinese are vulnerable when they're in the South China Sea, and that is where it's important for United States and India to work together collectively to cater for the future Chinese challenge. And catering for the future challenge is not fighting with China, but telling the Chinese that it will have serious consequences, and therefore it is imperative that they do not escalate. And if they do not escalate, a degree of regional stability and regional balance is created, and for which India and United States, through its other alliance partners, will work. I'm conscious of the fact that the Japanese are not going to be that are that involved in this whole thing. But the question basically is this: is that as long as we are Quad partners, as long as we have Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Initiative, we have the interoperability, we have the capacity to understand the big strategic picture along the maritime domain to contain and constrain the Chinese. So it's important to what people to understand this. That's not doing us any favor. United States is just looking up at the western bookend of the Indo-Pacific, which it cannot control on its own. It is providing India the capacity to do it, and it's also very important for my friends to understand that India is paying itself for it. India is not asking for a favor.
Yes, sir.
Like
I think
we got
you that's a
technology.
very important point. Yeah,
The
and
technologies that we get from France, the technology we get from Russia, the technology we get from Israel, they're all paid for by us. This is a
right.
simple transaction. and nobody is doing India a favor.
Right,
And
sir.
we should not waste.
Today, I'm
Let
going
me add,
to. Okay.
if
Yeah, please
this
go ahead.
is the relationship, like Brigadier Sehgal said, this is a relationship of mutual dependence.
Yes.
And
Good.
once this, when many times people say, what has suddenly happened now? Why is so much of effusiveness in this relationship? Effusiveness is because we have reached that pedestal where we can we can contribute as co-equals, and the strength is in mutual dependence. So let's not undermine this relationship, or either way, that either side is doing a favor to each other.
I'd like to put something a little lightly, but equally important. I think India has reached a term which my daughter calls escape velocity. We've come to that escape velocity where we're going to a different orbit, right? The
Yes.
international system recognizes it, the Indian system recognizes it. The issue is, where does this orbit go and settle? And definitely, there's more value to this orbit than we are actually talking today. I'll leave it at that. Today, I'm taking on questions by those who have not asked questions or new to this, because a lot of people have asked. We've answered the questions, a lot of their questions over the past few days. So Khalil Nabi, he's obviously from Bangladesh. I try request General Bhatia to take it on. India must behave with Bangladesh and other countries as equals. Greed and selfish attitudes must be avoided. Big talks are useless. China looking around, feeling the pulse of oppressed neighbors. Your take, sir. And
I
you might
agree.
like to.
I agree with them totally. Totally. See, we do India Bangladesh relations are on a upward trajectory. मैंने पहले भी बोला था कि there was a time when there were differences in our relationship. But today, India and Bangladesh have resolved a number of things, including the land border agreement, which was finished in 1974. And we do understand Bangladesh sensitivities, and Bangladesh also understands our sensitivities, and there is a lot of cooperation and with Bangladesh. And we find interaction between the military, the think tanks, strategic community, trade, economic development, commerce. I think it's a growing relationship, and there will all within neighbors there will be differences always, and the differences are being resolved to a great extent. And Bangladesh is a very important partner. We have to understand that India shares the longest borders with Bangladesh. It's not with China or Pakistan.
Yeah, I think
Over,
that's the.
over 96 kilometers of borders with Bangladesh. So I think there is a certain hangover of the previous years, which is being addressed. We have sensitive to Bangladesh.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Can I come in for a second?
Please, sir.
I just want to highlight to our friend from Bangladesh is this. You make the similar demands to the Chinese. You cancelled the port contract. You recently cancelled three other contracts of highways, bridges, because you found the Chinese to be aggressive in their pricing, and they were not delivering you. You never raise these questions with the Chinese. You raise them with us because we are your friends.
Yeah, you
You
can
have
talk to us, but not to the
do not
Chinese.
take people. My Indian neighbors have this tendency of telling India all the time that you are this, you are that, you are that. But when it comes to the Chinese or the other guys, they are go out of the way to accommodate them, even when they're realizing that they are being cheated or they are being given a short deal. So this is something which my friend has to understand. India will go all out of its way to accommodate Bangladesh. We will be supportive of Bangladesh, but do not expect from us that you will be able to shortchange us. I'm afraid that will not happen, like it does not happen in your relationship with the Chinese.
Uh, Right. This question, sir, Rabindra, he says, sir, we have 4 billion people, 1.4 billion people can't build our own rifle, tank, fighter, jet, sub, heli engines. Today, totally dependent on others, even tiny South Korea is ahead of us. So, just to put it in context, he's put a lot of things. He's a very pessimistic man. He's gone to the extent of says, does this channel only answer those who do give super chat and all that? I don't think so, right? This is a question which I will answer in great detail, right? In any other forum, because this is a broader question beyond this discussion. Because you have to understand what we have been able to achieve, and you have to understand what we have not been able to achieve in technology and indigenous development, because there's a history behind it. And unless you understand that history, we will not be where we are. So, you, at this point of time, you are right in saying that we have not developed many things, but equally we have developed a great number of things, right? So come back to me on an open session which I'm holding on Sunday, and I'll give you in detail what the answer to this question is, right? Uh, I'll Okay, so one point I think which is good. He says, "I'm the son of a retired JCO, and I'm a manager in SBI, but interested in politics, geopolitics. I subscribe to a channel and many other platforms, and gradually it is increasing in my knowledge since the last 2 years. Thank you, sir. It's a more of a reinforcement for us that we are doing the right thing." So the rest of the questions generally are of those people who have earlier asked, right? Then same, I go back to the thing. Let me ask, is given a super chat. So one off-topic questions: how many years do you believe it will take for us to make the Indian Ocean fully Indian, the way US Navy has a vast amount of the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans locked down? I don't think it's an off question. I think it's a very relevant question, right? And would you like to take a shot at it, sir, General Ahuja?
Well, I think as far as the oceans are concerned, one, let's accept that oceans are global connectors. None of us is going to fence the oceans, whether it's Atlantic or Pacific or Indian Ocean, but we are looking at creating secure sea lanes of communications where there is freedom of trade, free and open trade, and free and open global commons. That's what our aim is, based on rules based order. And yes, we are building our capability. We have sufficient capability in Indian Ocean. To quantify what is sufficient is difficult, but definitely from the Malaccas to the Gulf, I think definitely we have a viable presence, and that's why we play a lead role in the security of Indian Ocean. And progressively it will grow. So let's look at it from that perspective rather than putting fences around the oceans. That's my suggestion.
Right. Uh, there are a lot of questions, sir. I think we've gone past, way past our time. I'm so thankful to you, but I think the questions, apart from the questions, our discussion was also so heavy and interesting and thought provoking that we had to go through this. Not take the other questions. Many questions are related to development of weapons and all that. Please ask, come back on Sunday and ask me. I'll explain to you in detail, right? Most of it are not so great that we need to tie down the other respected gentlemen. At the end, so we've had this the fifth session we've had on the global power matrix, and I think this session has taken us to a different level. The other four sessions I thought were enlightening, but I thought this was a master one, and it is completely India centric the way I look at it, and that's how it has emerged. I'd like to thank all three of you, General Bhatia sir, General Brig Arun Sahgal, and General Anil Ahuja, for having taken the time and prepared for these sessions, which I had to put you through. And I thought you were absolutely outstanding in this whole all three sessions. I would also like to thank all our viewers and the audience who come live and keyed in all these questions. I think some of the questions which we have tackled in this indicate the interest which people take, and also indicate the depth of the questions at what they're thinking and what they're asking us. So I'm sure all of you have had this experience, and I've individually, all of you experienced, expressed this in each of your talks, that you enjoyed these sessions, and mostly
Every moment.
because every moment, mostly because the audience made it happen, right?
Yes.
Most of the time we talk, and when you don't get a response, it leaves us halfway through unsatisfied. But I thought in this, all these 5 sessions, in fact, I've had a series on Pakistan. Pakistan is already always emotive. We've had a series on China. China is becoming emotive slowly. But in this kind of a thing where the topic was a bit hazy and intransigent, I think the questions which were posed were fantastic, and the interest was even more better. And all I'd leave it today is that thanks a lot, sirs. Thanks a lot to the audience for making this great session. Thank you. Good evening and Jai Hind. We'll meet day after tomorrow, where I'm going to talk about Manipur, right? With my experience of having served there. Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot, and good evening and Jai Hind to all of you, sirs.
Thank
Jai
you
Hind
to
and
my
thank you very much.
panelists.
Thank
All
you,
the
John
very
Shankar.
best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Good night, sir. Good night, sir. Good night. God bless.
Bye. Good night. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.